character. Hello and welcome to the show, everybody. I am so pleased to have our guest on in the middle of jumping onto a plane and running to Glastonbury. This is a pre-recorded session, so all of this stuff will have happened by now, but I have Kristoffer Hughes on.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. I'm doing amazing, Kristoffer. How are you?
I'm not too bad, actually.
Yeah.
It's frightfully warm. Like you said, I'm in the middle of packing to head down to Glastonbury for the OBOD Summer Gathering, which will have happened, of course, when this goes out.
Which will have happened, yes.
So yeah, it was fabulous, of course.
I heard so many things from people. So for those who... It's good to see you. Well, it's good to finally meet you after speaking to you on text this whole time and like seeing a load of interviews and listening to you. It's weird to actually be interacting with you. Yeah, it's very strange. But it's okay. So for those of you who don't know who Kristoffer Hughes is, and if you don't, you should be. Kristoffer Hughes, I'm going to read a little bio here. So Kristoffer Hughes in Wales is chief of the Anglesey Druid Order, a Mount Haemus Scholar, and a member of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. He is a teacher, writer, workshop leader, and guest speaker at pagan conferences, camps, and festivals throughout the United Kingdom, Europe, and North America. Hughes worked professionally for His Majesty's Coroner for over 30 years. He is a Welsh language television presenter and actor. He's the author of From the Cauldron Born, The Book of Celtic Magic, As the Last Leaf Falls, previously titled The Journey into Spirit, and Ceridwen, as well as the creator of both the Celtic Tarot and the Yuletide Tarot. And I'll put all of Kristoffer's socials down below, but if you just Google Kristoffer Hughes, you'll find more than enough online. So Kristoffer, thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome. That sounds very impressive, doesn't it? You were reading that, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to meet this chap.
I always worry when reading the Llewellyn bios because sometimes they're out of date and they're like, well, no, I've transitioned now. Oh, sorry.
Yes, I did do a couple of interviews where they said that I worked for His Majesty's Coroner, which feels really strange because I actually worked for Her Majesty's Coroner. So Lizzie was still alive when I worked for the coroner, but that's a year and a half of my life. That's gone by in a flash since I left that particular part of my life. So yeah, it's been a lot.
It feels like the past few years have just flown by. I don't know if you feel the same way, but like in general since the pandemic.
I think, well, to be perfectly honest, my life feels as if I hit an oil patch at 25 and now I'm skidding to the grave. When the brakes are off. And they think, how on earth can I be? I'm already 50. How old am I? 52. So how did that happen? I never foresaw a day that I would be 52. So I had, and celebration was slightly poor because we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I felt as if I needed to do something because it's unlikely that I'm going to double it.
Well, you never know. I mean, you never know, right?
Well, you never know. I have sort of talked myself into living into my early 90s. So, and sometimes you just have to talk yourself into it. My grandmother did that.
Oh, yes. You're 9. Oh,
I know. She talked herself into her 90s. Bless her. Oh.
Yeah, you're 9. Oh, well, I mean, you're honestly, like, just on a personal note here, like, you were very open on your socials about sharing your 9 Margaret with the world, and the amount of love. I think that most people on your Facebook page were actually there for Margaret than you.
Oh yeah, very much so, and I loved it because it totally opened up her world. And whilst we might occasionally berate social media, and it has its downsides, it also has this tremendous ability to be able to lift people up. And this was a woman who was alone for most of the pandemic, looking after herself. And we would go and do her shopping and take her some food on a Sunday. And she felt as if she had a genuine connection to so many people all over the world through the power of social media. And she lived so much of her life through my eyes, which I just loved. Every conference I went to, whether I was speaking in America, in Pantheacon or Paganicon or wherever I was, I would take my grandmother with me and show her where I was and what I was doing. So she felt as if she got to see the world through her grandson's eyes, through the eyes of her druid grandson. She was very proud of her druid grandson. And that was lovely to be able to lift somebody up through the power of just your phone.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And it had a massive impact on her life, a massive impact. And I miss her terribly. She's been gone now. It'll be 2 years this July. I can't believe it. 2 years already.
2 years,
so,
wow.
It is crazy. But every now and again, she pops back up on social media. And I don't know whether it's because I befriend new people and they go back looking in my stuff and they find my grandmother and then they like it. So then it pops up. And so yesterday morning, I had one of those occasions. Like, oh, there's my 9.
I was going to say it's fascinating when that happens, because when that happens, for those of us who regularly interact, like just with the algorithm, so that popped up on my feed too, and I was like, oh, that's from like last year. What?
I know, it's really peculiar, and I definitely take it as some kind of a message as well, you know, because that's all happened by chance, and it just causes me to think of my 9. And when that happens, the dead come to life. And I feel very joyous and very privileged that we have these things that are available to us in the 21st century. You know, and I'm sure the ancient druids of old, they would have used them.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Although I'm sure, you know, there would be just as much bitchcraft between the druids of Britain and Gaul all the way back then.
And of course, they all spoke similar languages, so they would all understand each other back then. Right? Yeah. But it's I mean, it's an interesting thing, because like following your life and kind of following your work, connection, that word connection has been a resounding piece throughout, connecting all sorts of parts of your life. When it comes to druidry, when it comes to your work, when it comes to your other activities, what do you think connects them all together?
Oh, I tend to refer to the connectivity of my life as the triple D. Not necessarily a bra. Well, actually, I do know somebody whose bra size probably is a triple D. We'll get to her in a bit. But whilst it sounds like a bra size, it stands, in my mind, it's death, drag, and druidry. The 3 Ds of my life. And they're all about connection. And because ultimately, the reason that I am the person that I am is I just happen to be somebody who is so very much in love with my land, my culture, my language, my heritage. And I have been so incredibly lucky that I can share that connection with the rest of the world. And hopefully that some of it rubs off so that they find a connection to their own lands, or that they find a connection to my lands and they come and visit. And I love that connection can bring about so many possibilities. And whilst Death, Dragon, Druidry might seem as if they're in diametrical opposition one to the other, they're really not. They're mostly all about the transformation of various states of anxiety. So in my professional capacity, it's the transformation of anxiety to emotional relocation through bereavement services, through mortuary services. And those people were in an acute state of bereavement and grief. And our job was not only to care for the dead, but also to look after the living and help them at least find a way into their grief in a manner that didn't undo them entirely. Because so many of my clients met horrendous ends, you know, absolutely unimaginably terrible ends. And somehow our role was to help people through those experiences, those life-changing experiences. So to me, it was the transformation of anxiety, of pain and grief into emotional relocation. But for my druidry and my drag, I still maintain to this day that their function is for the transformation of anxiety into joy.
Right.
I always consider that the reason that so many people go down a spiritual route or seek out some form of spirituality is because essentially we all suffer a state of separation anxiety. You know, we're ultimately connected in the very beginning through our mothers to the great universe, to the great mother, to whatever you'd want to call it. And then we grow up, we hit our teenage years, we become full of tumultuous hormones. And then in our early 20s, we go looking for ourselves. And we climb a mountain in Tibet for somebody to say, oh, that which you seek is within you, and you think, oh, okay, I'll go looking for that then, and I found that I was equally in a state of anxiety, of separation anxiety. Didn't know where I was, who I was, what I was supposed to be. I tried Christianity, I tried a bunch of things, and none of them quenched my thirst for connection. Even though I quite liked, there's aspects of Christianity which are very beautiful, absolutely stunning, beautiful philosophies, but it didn't offer me a connection that grounded me to where I was. And then one night I had a woo-woo experience up in the mountains, and I found that I had a connection to place. And then suddenly it was as if I saw my entire landscape through very different eyes. Absolutely. Through these eyes that saw this aliveness within the land. And I didn't have a word for it. I was like 19 or whatever I was. And now I understand that was the mystic principle within nature itself that was reaching out and going, oh, are you okay? We're here, say hello. And it completely changed how I saw myself in the world and how I saw the world's relationship to me and my relationship with the world. And with my drag, that has always been about transforming other aspects of my anxiety into joy. So that would be the more socio-political stuff, because drag queens can say things that nobody else can ever say.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
We can be completely politically correct and not be condemned for it. And although, maybe there's a slight change in the environment today with that kind of shenanigans that's going on around the world. But
absolutely.
For somebody coming to one of my drag shows, for an hour, they get to transform their anxieties into joy. They can forget just for an hour. And I'm a firm believer that laughter is extremely good medicine. It releases a bunch of endorphins and dopamines and immunoglobulin A and all manners of oxytocin. Yes. All of these things get released, in your body when you laugh. And laughter more or less releases the same hormones that you have when you are making love or having fabulous dirty sex. The same hormones are released. And people can just for an hour perhaps just reset their battery so that when they leave, they can maybe look at their issues and problems from a different perspective, just slightly different. And I'd like to think that I play a part perhaps in the elevation of their joy. But it also elevates my joy and causes me to be able to find a way to, well, for a number of years, for over 30 years, it was a way to pressure release the horror that I was dealing with every day, because I needed something, a valve, and I would feel like a pressure cooker, that intense sort of, you just get this thin, powerful bead of steam coming out of the top of the cooker, and you think, oh, any moment now she's going to blow. And you would need to release the valve. And to me, my drag was a way to release the valve so that I could release that horror that would then enable me to deal with that horror on a spiritual level. So I find that whilst they may seem on the surface to be very different, but they're not. They form this triangle, and each one feeds the other, and it's fascinating. So I adore the whole process of the magic, the glamoury, using that word in its true sense, in its magical sense, of transforming into another individual, into an archetype who I adore and love. Her name's Maggie
Noggy, yes.
Probably is a triple D, and she's a big girl. And
a class for you, yes.
Her, they're transforming into her is an act of magic for me, because she exists somewhere. I'm vaguely aware of her hovering around here somewhere.
Yes.
She exists somewhere, and the process of adorning her, of decorating this 52-year-old face to look like a Glamazonian Welsh drag.
Anglesey's favorite farm girl, yes.
Yes, exactly. Is a ritual. It's
Yes.
it's a process that takes time, like 3 hours. So it's a ritual that transforms me into this archetypal being.
Yes.
But and of course, she wouldn't approve of all this druidry. She's a good chapel girl.
Well, so this is something I've always been interested in. So I don't think I've ever seen anything of Maggie Noggy that isn't in the Welsh language. I don't think. Do you perform her in English? No.
I don't really. Very, very little, maybe. I mean, very, very little. Predominantly, she's a Welsh language individual. Well, no, she's a Welsh woman. She's a Welsh
woman.
farm
Yes.
girl.
Yeah.
She exists in her own right. And when I am Maggie, I am certainly not me. When I'm Maggie, I am a 7'2" blonde farming woman who doesn't actually farm. She just lives on a farm because it would wreak havoc with the nails.
Well, yes, and she often comments on that when going to Eisteddfods and other places. But I'm curious with that, because like, I mean, majority of people watching this right now will probably know more about your druidry. That's just how this podcast goes. But that essence of taking on character and taking on and becoming this other person, I'm curious about that connection then to kind of your Christianity. You were originally training to become a was it a monk or definitely a pastor?
No, there was an evangelical pastor.
An evangelical pastor, right?
Yeah. Oh, have you just had a notification that your internet connection is unstable? Or is it just me that's unstable?
I think it's just you who's unstable. I think Maggie's trying to get in there. But I'm curious then with that. So you live in two very different worlds when it comes to these individuals. You've got, Kristoffer the Druid, rolling up to Glastonbury and multiple books under his name. And then you've got Maggie Noggy, Welsh language particularly lives in that culture and comes from that, a good chapel girl, right? I'm curious then, what is the process to go in and out of those parts of yourself? Oh.
In and out of them very, very fluidly. Because essentially, even though I love Maggie and everything that she represents in my life, ultimately, at the end of the day, Maggie is a job.
Yes.
That is a job that I do, something I get paid to do. And it just so happens that for some reason, whatever the gods were thinking, they gave me the gifts of stand-up comedy. And I love the fact that I have the gift of stand-up comedy. And I love to do stand-up comedy. It's just that I've never done stand-up as myself. That is until last year. Last year was the first time ever that I did a one-person show as myself, which was quite unnerving, but I did enjoy it. And I think that might be something for the future. But essentially, the stand-up has been something that I've done not only for my own satisfaction, but also for the connection that I have with an audience on a level that doesn't have the profundity of my druidry. So when I'm but then even as a druid, I'm a particularly merry, joyous, happy-go-lucky kind of druid, but there's an element of my druidry which is highbrow, profound, sacred, all of that good stuff. So when I'm at the Anglesey Druid Order school, that comes into it. When I'm giving workshops, that element is there. But in saying that, that also contains an element of stand-up comedy. It contains an element of the skills that I use as a stand-up comedian, because ultimately, whatever we do in our lives, whether it's spiritual or secular, we tend to ritualize elements of our lives, and ritual is ultimately the original form of theater. And I think that what I love, of course, being a Welsh person, is we see so much of the pomp and the ceremony and the beauty of ritual expressed through the National Eisteddfod and the Gorsedd of Bards, who do it so exceptionally well. And I think that all of these parts of my life have a ritualistic function. It's just the direction or the trajectory of that ritual has a different focus depending on what guise this is in. But there's still this element of ritual. There's still this element of transformation that's happening. And I love to play with all that. I love the interplay of that energetic matrix that is within me, that I can compartmentalize them, but there's also elements within them that don't need to be compartmentalized because they complement one another. And I think without my drag, I've been a stand-up comedian since 1991. You know, it's a long time. I've been a stand-up comedian as long as I've been a death service professional, and then almost as long as I have been a druid. So to remove one element of that triangle, the triple D, would do a disservice, I think, to the others.
Yes.
The others would be less of what they are if Maggie wasn't there. Or if my druidry wasn't there, Maggie would be a less of a person. And if my druidry wasn't there, I wouldn't have been as efficient a death service professional. So I think I need all of those pieces, those jigsaws, even though one of them has technically fallen by the side now. But I'm still death adjacent because I'm still a celebrant. I still do an awful lot of celebrancy work because of my connections in the local death service industry. So I'm still death adjacent, you know, so it's there. But then after 32 years, it's done the kind of informing that it was ever going to do. It has left an indelible scar upon my spirit. But so has Maggie, and so has my druidry. So I find that none of them are antagonistic. None of them fight against one another for attention. I mean, I've always lived for the applause, Ben. Always.
I know you've said that to me privately. Yes.
It's like, you know what I mean? And there's no point. And there's no point. I don't think there's any point. If you live for the applause, just be a Lady Gaga and claim it. Yeah. Because there ain't nothing wrong with it, and people will admire you for the fact that you're happy to say, "I live for the applause, darling."
It comes from a very different place. It comes from an integrated place. That appreciation of the applause. It's a very different thing from what I was going to ask about next, which is that taking on of a spiritual identity, which isn't actually coming from you, but from external to you, right?
It's literally. I think the magical term for it is assumption, you know, of assuming another form. And also what I love is, so I'm secretly, I'm a little bit of a Kabbalist, but don't tell anyone because, you know.
Won't tell anybody.
Don't tell the druids. And every August I go to Hawkwood College in the Cotswolds, which is the most stunning, beautiful place that has all this history. All the great and the good, you know, have been at Hawkwood at one point in the distant past. And I go there to study Kabbalah. Where am I going with this?
I'm not sure, but I have a very interesting question.
I know where I'm going. So I got excited and thinking about the Kabbalah course. And I love the discipline within my Kabbalistic studies, and I really admire one of my teachers. His name is Mike Bass from the Netherlands. He's an amazing Kabbalist teacher. But what I love is that within Kabbalah, there's this principle of thought forms, the creation of thought forms of things that exist on the astral or on other planes. And essentially with being, which is taking the example to the ridiculous end of the spectrum, but Maggie is essentially a thought form. She has been created. She is alive. She is as alive as the gods and goddesses that are a part of my spirituality, because of course 200 years ago they weren't gods and goddesses. It's by process of apotheosis and our needs that they have become gods and goddesses. And they may have been archetypal energies before that, but so was Maggie, you know. And while I would argue that she probably is a goddess, but I'm biased. But she's definitely this powerful thought form that exists independently of me. She has her own existence, but the applause thing is what feeds her. That's the energy that she needs in order
Those
to
are the
become
prayers that are feeding her, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's literally, it's like libation
Yes.
to the drag persona, you know. So I never took it for granted. And I do this peculiar thing, and I have no idea whether other performers do this, but I write to her. I have a I have a book. It should be here somewhere. Anyway, I have a journal essentially, but the journal is only full of letters that I write to Maggie.
Makes sense.
You know, which is bizarre. I have no idea. I've never sat down and actually analyzed why I do that, but I write to her, and I don't write to her every day, maybe every couple of days or so. And we'll write her a little note, even if it's just, you know, how are you? Not heard from you in a while.
Where are you? Yeah.
Yes, where are you? And it feels like there's an ongoing relationship with a part of me that I've created that has autonomy somehow.
I totally understand that. I used to LARP, live action role play, back in the day.
All right,
and I noticed like the kids in fandom, they're really, really pushing the boundary. And a lot of them are interested in chaos magic as well, so go figure, right? But that relationship to these thought forms, and taking on these aspects, and then the question: is it coming from a deep place inside? Is it coming from these external? Does it matter, right?
Exactly, because ultimately, does it all come from the same place? You know, is the microcosm and the macrocosm are joined up anyway. I love the fact that in Celtic mythology, in Welsh Celtic mythology, we have the concept of the indigenous Celtic otherworld, Annorvan, but that Annorvan is bilocated. It's an otherworldly location, but it also refers to my Dorvan, your own deepness, you know, so that you can access Annorvan through your own depth, and you can access it through the hollow hills. Either way, you can get to the depth of Annorvan, to the it's interesting. You could play with those concepts, I think, for hours and have no end of intrigue and mystery come to light. And of course, and that's what's amazing about being part of a magical community as well, is that we get to talk about these things, you know, because we're all fully paid up members of the Lunatic Fringe and we love it.
Yes, we all have huge libraries.
Exactly. I love it.
So sorry, go on.
Oh no, sorry, you go, because I'll just...
no. I'm just like well, millions of questions for you, but I'm curious around that. So you have, well, you're offering your orders course for the very first time online. That's a new development that's starting this year, and you've never done that. Everything else has been residential. You've always had people come to the landscape. That's been a place that people have been experiencing these Celtic Welsh deities. And I'm curious, what do you think, with that in mind, with what we were just talking about, how do you think it's going to change up people's relationships?
It's been a peculiar thing for this needs to happen, because so many of our teachings, whilst they're inspired by the locality, the teachings themselves are not necessarily locality specific. They have a universality to them. And because I get to travel, you know, I'm very lucky to get to travel all over the world and talk in conferences and online stuff. It's apparent that there's a thirst as well for the wisdom tradition that exists here. And that ultimately it is a wisdom tradition. You know, the Anglesey Druid Order is a wisdom tradition that's developed over, you know, a long time now. And hopefully it will continue to develop, that every year, every course, whether it's residential or online, will create new kernels of wisdom for the future. So I hope that whilst our teachings are relevant to place, but also have this universality to them, it offers people a way to connect to the ancestral echo of this place, because there is this magic to this particular place in itself within the Druid world, ancient and modern. Anglesey has this platform, this space within that continuum. And I think when people feel that they're connected to that in whatever form, that it gives them somehow a corridor to not only appreciate what happened in the past, but also to appreciate that it's not stuck in the past, that what we do is relevant to now, and the seeds that we plant will grow groves in the future that will be hopefully full of people whose function is to seed the future with wisdom. And for the last 20 odd years, we've been doing our courses in person because that's how I felt it should have been done. So when it came to doing stuff online, I was slightly, well, I've been reluctant for a number of years, but I've come to the agreement that, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm happy to do it, but I have to do the first one live, just so that it maintains an element of that oral tradition that Druidry is so famous for. And I think it surprised me because a lot of people are excited by the fact that it will be live. And even if they can't watch it at the time, they'll be able to catch up in the week.
Yeah.
It's still a person talking to them.
Yes.
And a person teaching them.
Yes.
Not just a PDF file, you know? Not that there's anything wrong with PDF files. We live in that world, and we will certainly be giving people PDF files as well, but that there will be this oral component to it.
Yes.
But I think that the online community that it will create will be wonderful, because it'll be people from all four corners of the world, not just Britain, and that they themselves will feel that they can contribute to a thought form that has always existed on this island in one guise or another, whether it was the ancient Druids, what the Druids became in the Celto-Romano period, to the bards of the Welsh bardic tradition, who certainly mythologized themselves as ancient Druids, all the way through to Iolo Morgannwg and the rise of the National Eisteddfod and modern Druidry. You know, it's this beautiful cauldron of influences from the last 2,500 years.
Yes.
And we're not in apostolic succession to any of that. We are just people who are in love with a place and who want to share that love. And within that love, there's elements of there is a wisdom tradition, and the tradition will be of value to other people. And you know what these things are like. People can do courses, whether it's OBOD, BDO, Andrecht Fine, any of these institutions offer teaching programs. And to people, they might only take away 5 significant things, or 40, or all of it, or one thing. But I think what's important is that whatever they're doing, that they should be inspired, and that inspiration and the power of inspiration that we call Awen moves them to be the enchanters that the world needs. And I think that's what we as Druids here on Island of Anglesey hope for ourselves, and hopefully we can share that with the world, so that people might think, I never knew that. Or they receive one of our teachings and think, oh my gosh, that's completely changed my view of something, you know? And that's my hope, is that they will take something from it and think, oh, I'm a little wiser than I was 4 hours ago. You know, and I can use that wisdom in a way to encourage other people to be wise, because God knows we need some wisdom in the world.
Oh, totally. I agree with you. Yeah. What I love about what you just said, I often, it's a weird thing for me, being from Wales but living in North America, and experiencing people's love of Wales who may have never even gone there before. But there seems to be a trend in like traditional witchcraft and like in modern paganism now, where people are starting to really connect into a particular homeland, a particular place, and that becomes the sacred land to them, and everything else is just ignored. What I'm also seeing, and what it sounds like your goal is to expand people's awareness, so that the wisdom is taken not necessarily from the landscape, but inspired by the landscape to be applied everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Because I see land, that the land that we all live on, as portals to the animistic principle that's hid within it, and the wisdom within that animistic principle. And that principle rises up in different lands, and it's flavored by the people who live there.
Yes.
So if it rises up in Tibet, it's flavored by the people of Tibet, or Indonesia, or Australia. So here in Wales, it rose up and it was seen through the lens of the Neolithic people, and then through the lens of the first wave of Celtic people, the Anglo-Saxons, the Normans. All of these people came, and all of them added to this cauldron. And of course, the Celts, we still exist. We're still here. We haven't gone anywhere. I'm a Celt, and there is a wisdom within that particular tradition. But that's not to say that that tradition has exclusivity over wisdom. It just implies that it spoke to the people here in a particular way. And by sharing that, and I've seen it happen by sharing the wisdoms from this land with some of my friends in the northwestern regions of the United States of America, and Northern California in particular, that they are then able to tap into the portal of their land and perceive the wisdom there. Because the message that we get from the trees here, druids, we talk to trees, enables us to share that with druids in other parts of the world, so that they can then feel that, well, I'll go and speak to my own trees and see what they say, but borrow from wisdom traditions, take wisdom from wisdom traditions and incorporate them into where you are. So I always consider that druidry is reactionary. Druidry is a response to the land and a response that the people have to that land. So if someone is inspired by the gods and goddesses of the Mabinogi, and they can incorporate those into their lives wherever they are, because ultimately it's those particular myths are only speaking of us. There are mythology. They're just flavored with Celtic names, with Welsh names, but the stories are the same all over the world. Wherever you go, these stories are the same.
Absolutely.
I think academics would call them international motifs, wouldn't they? But I call it magic. It's a wisdom tradition that is speaking from the land itself. It's the land telling us, oi, you're in relationship with me, and I am in relationship with you, and I have something to share with you. And it's going to use language and symbols pertinent to whatever region it's speaking from.
Absolutely.
But that's the same voice all over the world. It's the same voice. It's just flavored by humans or animals or trees. So I always think that exactly. So when people think, oh, you have to be a Celt to be a druid. No, you don't. A druid is somebody who is oak wise. And yes, they were a product of the Celtic cultural continuum, but there's no reason why people can't borrow from the Celtic cultural continuum and do it appropriately. They say, don't they, the difference between cultural appropriation and appreciation is education. If you're fascinated by it, learn a bit of Gaelic, learn a bit of Welsh, learn a bit of Breton, find out what the things that worry us, find out the things that are troublesome to us, and perhaps help a little. And if you're stuck on the other side of the world, maybe you can give £2.50 to a charity locally down in Cardiff, or whatever, to feel that you have a connection, to almost say thank you for the wisdom tradition that you're attracted to. But to go to, I'm trying to think of someone now, let me think. Oh, right. So I went to this place called Arnold in the Sierra Mountains of Northern California in 2017, I think. And the trees there, the giant sequoias, they're 2,000 years old. Or 2,500 years old and 400 feet tall. And I was there with some druid friends from that region, and I'm like, have you heard the stories and songs of these trees? You live here, and I know elements of your past and elements of your history are problematic, but your ancestors are now buried in this soil. You are still a people of this place. And speak to the trees. These trees have wisdom to share with you. We've got oaks and rowan trees here, but our yew trees may be as old as the giant.
But
and possibly the true immortals of our planet. But it's about how we hear. Well, actually, not necessarily how we hear. It's what we hear from other wisdom traditions, and then how we listen to the voice of wisdom that rises from the animistic principle of wherever we live. And I think that's what all of these things, whether it's druidry, Wicca, Asatru, heathenism, shamanism, whatever, I think they all act as portals that enable us to reach that one voice that is speaking from the very earth beneath our feet, that's telling us, I am in relationship with you, and fall back in relationship with me, because we do get separated from it. We do become so anthropocentric that we forget that we're part of an organism, you know.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what all of this is about. It's about finding our way back to that one tree, to the one world tree that unites all of us. And all of these fabulous things, you know, druidry to me is fabulous. I love it. I absolutely love it. But it's one portal, one gateway, one doorway to, through a wisdom tradition, to the voice that's inherently in the land that we've just deafened our ears to as a species.
I really feel that. Yeah. No, I really feel that. You're reminding me of a little anecdote I was told about you, or maybe I listened to you tell this. I'm not sure if one of our mutual friends told me this, but I remember you. There was a very early time in California. You were over there. I don't think it was when you were studying over there, but it was in Druid time. But you were in. You were on the Golden Gate Bridge, and you were looking out at the bay. And you were having a really hard time connecting with the land of California because it just didn't remind you of home. And you were looking out, and then suddenly you saw that cauldron of Ceridwen right in front of you, and you were bawling and bawling, and then of course the police came because they were afraid there was something happening, right? But that connection point, right? But it's that relationship. I think so many people get lost in that idea of relating to where they are, but seeing these universal principles and listening to that local chapter of that, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I remember that so vividly, standing on that bridge, because I'd been busy as well. And although I love traveling abroad, I'm usually busy. The conferences are, well, they're full on. Yep. They're like, you know, and when you're there as a presenter, you know, I'm one of them authory people. So you're broadcasting, you know, you're on, woo, you know, for the whole time that you're there. And it's fabulous and I love it. But oh my word, it can be really exhausting. And I felt that I hadn't actually felt the land of California, not in that particular region. And I had a few days at the end of that conference and took myself to San Francisco. I'm like, what is the spirit of San Francisco? You know, and it's got to be here, and I need to go and find it. But I needed, I think, a time to be still. Sometimes for hierophany to occur, we need to stop and allow it to happen. And I stood in the middle, the dead center of that bridge, and looked out at this amazing bay. And what I saw was a cauldron. And my god of the sea is called Llyr. That's his Welsh name. But as soon as I thought, oh, I shall call to Llyr, I immediately, and it was only my brain making an association, in my head, the name Pacificus came, the peaceful one. I'm like, well, this is the Pacific. So does that mean, and it was as if at that moment, the Pacific reached out and said, my name is Pacificus. You will know me as Llyr. You know, everybody know, but I'm still the same thing. There's only one ocean. And when I walk off the coast of Anglesey into Cable Bay, it's exactly the same water as is washing underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. I just call it Llyr here, but you go to the Mediterranean and it's got all manners of fabulous names, you know. And I suddenly felt the spirit of that place, and the spirit of that place was flavored by the San Francisco Bay Area and those whopping hills on either side of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I was inconsolably moved by it all until this tap on my shoulder by this policeman.
A strapping American cop came up to you.
Yes. Are you all right, sir? I can't do accents. I butcher them. And and I was just pointing, going, "It's a cauldron." And he must have thought, "Oh, he's going over. He's going over." And I was so moved. So I ended up chatting to this policeman about why I was so moved, and he was fascinated. He was absolutely fascinated. And I think it was a punctuation as well in his day, because people have taken their lives on that bridge.
Absolutely.
And fallen into the embrace of the Pacific. And yeah, it was a peculiar moment, but it was one that I held very dear in my heart, because I was able to stop and sense that animistic principle there in San Francisco. And it felt just the same as it does here. I just have different names for it.
I love it. I love it. Oh, I'll be honest, when I heard that story for the first time, because I have a really hard time connecting with Canada, because, any of my viewers will know that, I've pined to be home for 30 years. I'm pining to be in the UK. It's home, home, home. And when I heard that story for the first time, and I'm pretty sure it was actually a mutual friend of ours who told me that story, it gave me a different lens to start looking at my local landscape, Ontario. Here, I'm surrounded by all the Great Lakes here, and I've never really fully appreciated it. And when I started to see that through that lens,
I think it's important, as well as polytheists, pagans, druids, whatever
we call ourselves,
that we fall into an understanding that the earth is in relationship with us, and sometimes the earth needs us to be in relationship with it. And we have a concept here in Wales called hiraeth, and hiraeth doesn't translate very well, but they usually translate it as a longing or a homesickness that only a Welsh person can feel for Wales. But I think we all suffer from hiraeth wherever we are in the world. And I think the hiraeth is when a connection to a place is severed, and that it isn't just us longing for it, but it's it longing for us. Because we're the one same thing. We're of this place. Our atoms are created here. We go back to here. So wherever we are in the world, I think sometimes the earth itself, the land itself, is trying to reach us, trying to speak to us.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult to hear it at times through our own bias, through our own judgments, through our own idiosyncratic lenses. So, but I think, and of course, to me, that principle is hierophany. It's when the sacred speaks to you through the ordinary apparent world, And at times, I think I was talking about this to somebody, in a class last night, that one of the most effective ways of listening to the land that we live on is to practice boredom.
That makes sense.
Practice actual boredom, not active boredom, because that means you're doing something, but to practice actual boredom, to stop, switch your phone off and go outside and just sit for 3 hours. And then when you're so bored of it, you've done enough of it. But you can't just like, oh God, I've got to do something. That's probably enough. But I think to be out in the wild, in nature, sitting by a lake or a river, and practice boredom is a really important way of stopping and hearing what is around us. And then we hear glimmers of pearls of wisdom that wisdom traditions nurture and put together in a structure, which is what we do as druids. We take those pearls of wisdom that the earth gives us, and in order to hear them, we need to practice boredom. Because we're all addicted to these things. Kids aren't bored anymore. They've got TikTok.
Yeah, it's true.
You never hear a teenager going, "Oh, I'm bored" anymore, because they've got TikTok. You just go on TikTok for 4 hours.
I never understood TikTok. I know our friend Mara loves it, and all of her coven love it, but I never gotten on TikTok myself. But I'm not a teenager.
I try, and then the algorithms tell me that it's like, why is my algorithms full of usually bald men in their 40s just wearing Speedos? That's saying significantly more about me than I would want anybody to know about, but that's what happens to me on TikTok. You know, cats.
You're gonna have to share some of those stories with me, I'll be honest with you.
And whilst I've tried my best to engage with it, I fear that I'm of that generation that just doesn't seem to be able to engage with it. I'd rather just go and sit in the garden and, you know, tell the nettles what I've been up to.
I love that. I love what you said about Hiraeth. That was a good transition point. Because you yourself have a connection to a landscape up in the middle of the northern Arctic that it seems whenever you go there, that is a sense of Hiraeth for you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I have a Hiraeth for that place. I once you just mention, well, you haven't mentioned the name of the place yet, but Finland. When I hear the name Finland, I get Hiraeth, and I'm not a Finn. Not a Finn at all. I can speak a bit of Finnish, and I have absolutely no genetic descendants from Finland. Not one, nothing whatsoever. But I have this affinity for a particular region. I've been to Helsinki, nothing. It's beautiful. Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous, but no affinity to Helsinki whatsoever. Oulu, it's nice, no affinity. As soon as I go up into the Arctic Circle, it feels as if a part of me is at home. I'm like, oh, I've got more than one home. And I do. And I think we can all have more than one home, or a place where we feel that we are in profound relationship, you know, with the spirits of the place. And I rent a cabin 8 miles from the nearest town, deep in the forest, completely alone, 5 miles from the nearest house. And it is incredible, the beauty of that place. I love the darkness because I go during polar night. The cold, the intensity of the cold, the dryness of the cold, the ciders, which are the spirits of that place, as they're called in the language of that region. It is incredible, and I feel a Hiraeth for it when I'm not there. But the peculiar thing is that when I am there, and I usually go for, you know, a few weeks, I'll have Hiraeth for here.
Different parts of yourself, right?
Yeah, different parts of my, but I think it's because different parts of myself hear the song of the land in a different way. So the song of Rovaniemi and that region of northern Finland speaks to me in a way that Anglesey doesn't. Another place that has the same effect is the Orkney Islands. And I used to go to the Orkney Islands every year for a long time, and I haven't been for about 13 years now. But I long to go there. I long to be there because it sings to me in a different way than home. And I don't think that's antagonistic. And I don't think that one place is wanting me more than another. I think we can have different relationships with a place in exactly the same way as we can have different relationships with people. Absolutely. The earth has personage. You know, it is... It's filled with persons, whether they're rock people or tree people or people. We can have relationships with these different peoples.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's given me a lot to think about. I was setting up another question to lead into you talking about your new tarot deck, the Yule Tarot. And I'm curious then, how does that relationship with Finland and the Arctic feed into this tarot deck, which is another huge part about you? I think one of our mutual friends said you had like a whole annex full of tarot decks.
I have a lot, yeah. There's a slight collection here behind me. These are my favorites. These are the ones that I use all the time, but the dining room where the library is has an obscene amount of tarot decks. But yeah, I'm very connected and deeply in love with the tarot because it was my introduction into this world. And I've spoken about it a bunch of times. I write about it in my Celtic Tarot book. I came across a deck in a secondhand bookstore in Holyhead, where I used to live, Caergybi, when I was a teenager. And I didn't know what they were. I didn't have a clue, but I was mesmerized by them. It was raining really hard that day, and my friends and I and some of the local kids had built a den, a den in the woods, in these small scruffy bushes in Penrose Park in Caergybi. And we had some old logs in there and some old bits of furniture, a little den, and we'd go there and have sneaky fags, sneaky cigarettes. And I sat in there in this storm. Well, that's being a bit dramatic. It was raining. And I was mesmerized by these cards, and my heart was thumping. I just knew that there was something in them that was special, unique, magical, and I had no idea what they were. And that was my gateway. And ever since then, I'm just obsessed with tarot cards. They're everywhere. They're all over my desk here. They're everywhere. Everywhere you go, there are cards, and I glean wisdom from them. And when I had the opportunity to design my own deck, well, I was ecstatic. I think I collapsed and didn't come to for about 3 days. Somebody had to pass a bit of lasso underneath my nose to rouse me, And I came to design a deck, and that was the most incredible thing. And then I love the winter season. I'm a winter child. I'm a Scorpio. I'm born just on the cusp of Scorpio and Sagittarius, and the winter has a particular appeal to me, and I love the whole Nadolig, midwinter, Christmas thing. I love all of that. So going to Finland is particularly poignant because even though it's a very commercial thing, but fair play, they've done it quite well. It's the official hometown of Santa Claus is Rovaniemi. That's where Santa Claus lives in Europe. So whenever I go, I always tend to go and see Father Christmas as well, because he's or Jurlapoki, I should say his real name, Jurlapoki, the Yule goat. And I love all of that. So I was berating a particular deck. I'd seen a deck that was advertising itself as, I don't know, the Christmas Tarot or something. And I bought it, and I was so disappointed to find that it was only the major arcana, and it was really dark and sinister. And I'm like,
it was definitely a travel into the uncanny valley.
Yes, the box had lured me in, and it had done me wrong. And I was berating it to my tarot editor at Llywelyn. And the problem is, if you berate anything or moan to any one of the people I work with at Llywelyn, they might just turn around and say, "Do you think you can do better?" That's precisely what happened. And I'm like, oh no, I walked right into that one. So my editor said, "Well, do you want to have a go at doing one?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." And I wanted to be whimsical, like I had the London Illustrated News in my head, because I love the old copies of the London Illustrated News, and some children's books like like Bramley Hedge. You aware of Bramley?
Yeah,
Jill Barker.
Yeah.
Had those things in my head. And when it comes to Bramley Hedge, which is a book I still love I'm not even middle-aged anymore. I'm 52, which basically means I'm old. And
mature.
Mature, yeah. So I still love Bramley Hedge, and the one that I love the most is Winter Story. So I've always had this affinity. So to have an opportunity to create a deck based on that. So my major arcana are not all of them, because there's too many. There's too many midwinter archetypes that can fit in the major arcana. So I battled with, well, I can't get them all in. You can only get 21 in. So, but I've got 21 good ones.
Yeah. And well, Mary Louise gets in there. So
Mary Louise is in there. Yeah. Krampus is in there. The Matrona is in there. And because there are so many Matronas, because there are so many of the pregnant with the sun, female deities, goddesses, I had to like bunch them into one. And just put some symbols in there to represent some of the, some of the big ones.
It sounds kind of scary, actually. I hope it's not like an abomination now.
Oh no, she's quite beautiful. So there's just little giveaways, like little symbols on her lantern and stuff to refer that she could be, whatever goddess you want her to be, because you could fill a deck with just the female figures for midwinter. And then the minor arcana is how we as human beings connect to the season. So, the suit of gifts. Pentacles is all about the money and the possessions and overspending. And the canes, candy canes, is the suit of swords. So it's about the mental stuff, because it can be a pretty tricky season. So yeah, it's been lovely, and I got to work with an artist called Erin O'Leary Brown up in upstate New York, who didn't even know that this world existed. And we scoured the internet and we found her, and I fell in love with her work. And it must be quite a peculiar thing for an artist to do, because they don't necessarily have a lot of artistic freedom, because I'm designing the cards, so everything has to be specific, because of the symbology of the tarot. She had a ball. She really enjoyed it.
They're beautiful cards. The ones that I've seen, like they have that whimsical quality of like a children's Christmas. They almost reminded me of like the Jolly Postman, that kind of feeling.
Yes,
but definitely a lot in there.
Sort of late Victorian Christmas postcards.
Yes.
So I'm so excited. So by the time people start watching this video, I will have had my author copies.
Oh, that's so exciting.
I'll pass out again. This is thing, I become overwhelmed. So, Ian will have to pass some Brasso under my nose again.
So last question then, would this be something that you would offer a class on? Would you offer a class using this particular deck and the mysteries and building it?
Yes, I think so. I teach tarot anyway. I do a residential tarot course, and I do them online when I've got time. Time is a funny thing. Yes. Trying to fit it all in is always problematic. But yes, definitely, I'll definitely be doing some kind of
something,
of course, because the problem is not that it's a problem. It's just because it's a product at the end of the day, and Llywelyn are limited as to the space that they've got. You've only got so many words that you can put in the book, because it has to fit in a box, and I understand all of that, but sometimes I get a little bit upset that I couldn't share everything I wanted to share, but then that would be 100,000 word book.
That's the thing, right?
You're only allowed 30,000, you see, for these fairly formulaic books that are in the tarot kits. So I always feel as if people aren't getting what was in my head to begin with. So the only way to do that is to just share it, do some courses, do some workshops. So when we get to the winter, I'll be doing
love it. I
just get to talk about my favorite subject, apart from druidry and death and drag. I've got a lot of favorite subjects.
That's a good thing. And gin.
Oh, I love a bit of gin. Am I drinking gin?
I hope that's not inappropriate to say. I think my readers know that my viewers know that you enjoy the gin. I also love gin too.
It's not gin. It's lemon cordial. But I'm going to have a gin, because I still have some bits to do after I speak to you, and I shall do it with a gin, and then pack the car to give the glass.
All this jet set life, you don't know when you'll get the next like really good Welsh gin, right?
Well, the good thing though about Britain, there's gins everywhere. There's micro distilleries opened up all over the place. Oh, my liver. Oh, my word.
You'll have a wonderful time. Kristoffer, thank you so much for coming on the show. It is such a pleasure to finally meet you, on this at least. And thank you for sharing with us. And thank you for sharing with us some of the pieces you haven't shared before. I really appreciated that.
You're more than welcome. Anytime.
Thank you. For those of you who are watching, you can find out more about Kristoffer underneath. You go to his socials. He's on Facebook. He's on Instagram. The Druid Order has a website, and you can, of course, look up his books on Llewellyn's main page. I'm not sure who I have on next week, because this is pre-recorded weeks in advance. So check out who is on next time. And Kristoffer, enjoy your jet setting.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Bye. Hwyl fawr.